boys and girls, and the adults around them, you're welcome to another episode of The Junior Citizens on Branama Television. I'm Betty Dibia, welcoming you, and with me we have 4 junior citizens sitting here. We have more that are not seated here, and we'll get to hear their voices on this episode of the program. Before I introduce our very special guest, we will be hearing the names of the children.
My name is Izzy Prosper.
My name is Olivia Olatunde.
My name is Light Ondamara.
My name is Amarachi Ibe.
Our special guest today, we have a VIP. He is so many things. He is a lawyer. He's a professor of law. He's held public office in Lagos State at the federal level, and he's none other than the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank
it's
you
really
very
an
much,
honor.
Thank you.
Guys, join me. It is an honor to have the former VP
Thank you.
in the house.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So today on the show, as usual, we talk about the rights, not just the rights, but the responsibilities of every child towards a nation building. And that is what we're here to talk about today. What is their responsibility as citizens of the country, as young people before they get older? Maybe talk a little bit about the Constitution. Do we know what the Constitution is?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Constitution? Okay, we'll get to hear from the Prof before we go further with the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us once again.
Thank you.
All right, sir.
Thank you very much. And such a pleasure to be here with
Great to have you too.
you. Thank you. And I think that first, it's important to understand that a country is about people. You know, so when we talk about Nigeria, we're talking about the people of Nigeria. And that includes adults and young people. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, there are far more young people than adults. Maybe they're about 70% of our country's population is actually a population of very young people. So when we talk about Nigeria, we're talking really about young people. And I think it's important to also understand that because the country is yours, the country doesn't belong to anyone else. It belongs to you. You know, just as Americans, you know, I would say the country belongs to them. You know, wherever you're born and bred is your country. And then, so you owe a responsibility to that country to do the best you can and to be the best you can. And, you know, so the thing about being responsible, the thing about being a good citizen is that you can be a good citizen in whatever it is you're doing, even as a student, you know, even as someone in school. So you're not really necessarily, you don't have to be in government, you don't have to be a business person, you don't have to be an entertainer, you don't have to be working to be a good citizen. I think that at wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you can actually be a good citizen. You know, young men, women, young people like yourselves can be good citizens. And that comes from understanding your responsibility, that this country belongs to you, it doesn't belong to anyone else, it is yours, and whatever you make of it is what it will be. So I'll just talk very quickly about the constitution of the country. So every country has some kind of a constitution, and the constitution is really just a document, it's a book really, that talks about the rights that you have as a citizen of the country, and it talks about the different organs of government. You know, so for example, in Nigeria we have what is called the executive. That is, at the federal level, you have a president, you have a vice president, then you have ministers. All of that is written in the Constitution. It says that the country must have a president, it must have a vice president, it must have ministers, and all the ministers are from 36 states of the federation. So every state has a minister. Then it says that we must have a legislature. That is the people who make the laws, you know. So that's the National Assembly. So we also have a legislature. It also says we must have a judiciary. These are the court systems, the courts and the judges. They are the ones who decide cases. So if there is a dispute, if, for example, if you own a piece of land and somebody comes on it and says it is their piece of land, then you go to court, you hire lawyers. It's the judiciary or the judges that decides who wins and who loses. All of these sorts of things are contained in the Constitution. So it is in the Constitution, for example, that to run for president, let's even say to run for governor of the state, because also there in the Constitution you must have governors of every state, you must have deputy governors, you must have members of the House of Assembly, and all of that. To run for governor, you can be maybe about 30 years old. Now, under the new laws, I think it's 30 years old, So you need to be at least as old as 30 to run for governor. But to run for member of the House of Assembly, I think all you need to be is 25, so just before you're 25. So you guys can't run now for governor, if you see what I mean. You can't just wake up one morning now and say, well, I'm roughly about 12 years old, so it's time for me to run for governor. So you really have to wait until you're about 25. But all of that is contained in the Constitution. So it's also in the Constitution that you have a right to freedom of expression. In other words, you have a right to say what you wish, to say what you like, but all your rights are subject to the rights of other people. So your right to say whatever you like, stops where you say something that's offensive to somebody else. So even if you say even if you have a right to say whatever you like, you can't say things that are offensive, you can't tell lies about people, or make statements that are what they call slanderous or libelous. In other words, you say things that demean them. For instance, if you were to say, oh, Mr. X is a thief, or Mr. X is a murderer, and you have no proof that they are what you say they are, then you have exceeded your right to freedom of expression. And that means that Mr. X, who you call the thief or murderer, can then take you to court, and you may have to pay a lot of damages. So there are all sorts of things in the Constitution. The Constitution is about how your country is run, what your rights are, what your responsibilities are. So that's what the Constitution is. Right.
Do you have a question yet? Prosper.
Question.
Okay. What inspired you to be a leader and to join the government to build up Nigeria?
Well, just as I said, the country belongs to all of us. All of us. I mean, you are citizens. So I believe that if something belongs to you, you owe that thing a responsibility to do the best you can. So my reason for going into government was really to be able to do my very best for the nation, offer my own services, and I've been, as you've heard, I've been a teacher, a law teacher for many years, constitutional law teacher, also a lawyer. So I understand, quite a bit about how a government should run, what should happen, and then also I have some beliefs. I believe very strongly that government must be for the people. In other words, we must make adequate provisions for people in whatever shape or form. People must be educated, they must have medical health, they must have some support when they are vulnerable or have difficulties of any kind. Now, you can only achieve any of those objectives if you have a political platform. Of course, you can do things without necessarily being in government. But in order to be able to influence your own thoughts, in order to be able to ensure that your thoughts and ideas get to the largest numbers of people, you need to be in government. Which is why I decided that I should go into government. And of course I got an opportunity to go into government. So those are the reasons why I thought it would be good to go into government. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you ever tried to aim for being president of Nigeria?
Yes, I have. Yes, I did. I ran for the primaries of my party, the APC, you know. Of course, as you know, the primaries is where the delegates of your party vote for who they want to be the presidential candidate. So I did run for the primaries, you know, but yes, I did run for the primaries, you know, so I have tried to be president, yes.
When you're vice president, have you like, do you think with your honest heart that you've made a very big difference in Nigeria from before?
Yeah, let me say to you first, as vice president, you are vice president, you are not the president, right? What that means, of course, is that you do not have executive authority. You are the deputy. So your boss has executive authority, the president has executive authority. But then what you have a good role to play, because you can advise about what you think needs to be done. And then there are a few things also that you are able to do by, you know, just by virtue of the fact that the president passes on those responsibilities to you. So for example, one of the things that I'm quite proud of that we're able to do is something called the social investment policy. Now, I believe, just as I had said earlier, that one of the important things that a government ought to do is to make provision for vulnerable people who are not necessarily able to afford certain things. So when we launched the social investment policy, we were very concerned that children in public schools should be fed a meal a day. You know, that's a school feeding program. It's called a homegrown school feeding program. And we started it in 2016, and we're able to feed 9.6 million children every day across the country. Now that's important because, as you know, where children are fed well, where they don't suffer from malnutrition, they're able to develop mentally aside from developing physically, you know. So we're trying to do two things. One, we're trying to ensure that farmers have, you know, that we invest in farmers, because if you're feeding children a homegrown school feeding, it means that the food comes from the farms. We're also trying to ensure that the children are fed, very well fed, you know, at least one meal a day, which is important to prevent malnutrition, to ensure that they are mentally stable and all that. And then, of course, cooks, people who cook the food, also have work to do. You know, so that was one. Other thing we did as part of that program was something called conditional cash transfers. So there are people, especially living in the hinterland, living in very many parts of Nigeria, you know, usually in the rural areas, who have very little access to money, you know, poverty, you know, on account of poverty. So we were able to work on giving some of them some money, you know, on a monthly basis. You know, that's what's called a conditional cash transfer. You know, we say that if you ensure that your children go to school and access medical health, we'll give you 5,000 naira, you know, a month and all of that. And we're able to do that for, you know, a good number of children. We also had something called Empower. So Empower was a program for young people, for employing young people who are out of school but have no jobs. Now, providing jobs is a major problem because this is a country of 200 million people, and we're growing at 6 million people every year, right? That's a huge number. That's the size of Liberia, another country, every year. So if you're growing at 6 million people every year, it means that somehow we have to find a way of providing work for people. But you can't provide all the work, which is why you have the private sector, you have people who are doing private business who can then employ other people. So government can't provide, you know, jobs for everyone. But under the Empower program, we're able to provide jobs for young people who are out of school, 500,000 of them, you know, from different local governments. You know, and the whole idea, of course, was to up that to about 1 million as time went on. So we're able to, you know, provide those jobs. Many of them were teaching in primary schools, you know. Some of them came under the NAGRO program, which was they were being trained to help as extension farmers, you know, extension workers in farms. Some of them were N-Tech, trained in some technology to be able to help, you know, to be able to do work as technologists of various kinds. So some of that was all the stuff we did. I'm sure we'll take all the time if, if
All right, sir.
yeah.
We'll take a quick break now. The children have more questions, and I know that our special guest is ready to give them answers. And he has questions, I hope, for the children. Please stay with us. And we're back. You're still watching The Junior Citizens on Branama Television. I'm Betsy Dibia, and we have with us a very special guest, the former Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. He's been answering questions from the children, and we're going to continue with that. But before we go on to Dami, whose turn is next, I have a question from one of our friends who lives in Bagada. That is Jeff Oliha, who says, Professor, you have represented the country, the president, at so many international events. What goes on at such meetings? And do you always agree? When you disagree, it says when you fight, like when you disagree, how do you resolve it? And then everybody comes out taking pictures.
Okay, so just to take one example, because there's so many different international events. So to take one example, ECOWAS, which is the organization for West African countries, this is one of the meetings that I've attended, representing the president. And what generally tends to happen is that we take particular issues to discuss. So for example, it might be the question of power, you know. How do we, because so Nigeria, sometimes, you know, we have deals with other countries to sell them power or to sell them fuel or to open our borders to enable them, to enable trade in one shape or form or the other. So there might be complications. They may say, for instance, that, oh, we've had problems with
Smuggling.
with not necessarily smuggling. We can complain that we've had problems with smuggling. That, you know, then we'll say, okay, let's talk about that, you know, and then we'll discuss it. Why is there smuggling? What do we need to do? How do we need to? So when we disagree, of course we disagree on so many things. But I think that by and large, because there is a great deal of maturity, I mean, and most of those who come to these meetings are persons who have represented their governments and all of that. You know, we're usually civil enough to be able to resolve the problems easily. But one other thing is that before the heads of states meet, the ministers of the different countries would have met. That's one of the very important ways of resolving disputes. So all the major arguments would have been taken by the ministers, you know. So at the time when it comes to the heads of states, most things have been resolved. Most things, you know. So there may be one or two sticky points, but otherwise, most things have been resolved. So that helps also to prevent conflicts and to prevent, you know, any form of fighting, as Jude has suggested. So that's how it works.
But the language problem, there are three languages spoken majorly.
Yes,
English, French, and Portuguese.
Yes.
Does that add to the problem?
Well, not necessarily, because we have good interpretation, there's a good translation going on. You know, there is, you know, simultaneous translation of whatever you're saying. So if I don't speak Portuguese, so I wear my earphones, and the translation is usually very good, because these translators are very experienced. So I know exactly what the person is saying in Portuguese, I know what someone is saying in French, and when I speak English, they also can understand. Yeah.
All right. Dami.
Okay, so what have you been up to since you left office as the former vice president of the country?
Well, a few things. One is my involvement with climate change. You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the climate crisis, which, and the long and short of that is that if we continue to use fossil fuels like coal, like petrol, you know, and gas, and all of those fossil fuels will be polluting the environment. And if we're not careful, if we continue at the rate we're, and when I say we, I'm talking of the whole world now, you know, if we continue at the rate we're going, by 2050, we may have a major human disaster, we may have a major environmental disaster, which is global warming coming into its in the worst possible form. So we're trying to prevent global warming by saying you've got to reduce the use of fossil fuels and begin to use renewable energy, which is like solar, like wind, like hydro, which is water and all of that. So but an interesting part of that is that the reason why we're in this particular situation now, where there is an imminent danger, is because of the industrialized countries, the wealthier countries. They are the ones who have caused the major problems that we have today because of the way that they industrialize using fossil fuels. But we have a problem in Africa because we are the fastest warming continent. We're the least emitters. We're the least contributors to the problem. But we're the worst sufferers, right? So a lot of what I'm engaged in now is talking to African governments and heads of states and talking to foreign governments and heads of states and trying to reach an agreement on how to have a just transition. How can we be fair in this transition? Because if we are not fair, we may end up putting a lot of burden on Africans, for example, who are the least emitters, right? So we're talking about all of those kinds of things and, going back and forth. And then I'm also involved in something called the Africa Innovation Fund. This is a UNDP-led fund with several governments of African countries. The whole idea is that we're putting together a fund of about $1 billion for resourcing the innovation ecosystem. In other words, to give resources to young innovators who are, doing things in technology, right? Or technology-enabled sorts of things. And there's so many young people doing incredible things. So what we do is that we set up in different countries, we set up centers of excellence. So in Nigeria, for example, in Lagos, we have a center of excellence for fintechs, that's payment systems, technology-enabled payment systems. In Ghana, we have an agri-tech, in Kigali, in Rwanda, we have a health tech, So we have different centers of excellence. And then we have unipods in universities, and several universities, and we're establishing very many more. The whole idea being to give some opportunities to young people who have great ideas, but don't have the money or the finances to, be able to develop their ideas and make their ideas commercial, so that they can make money from it, employ lots of people and all that. So that's the sort of thing I've been engaged in. Yes.
If I may come in here, Professor, how young are the people involved or who have been responding to the program?
There's several people who are under 25, several people, some over 25, but just any age, frankly. I mean, if you have a great idea.
So they can.
Oh, absolutely. If you have a great idea that you think, obviously you need to be. So one of the ways of ensuring that your great idea is as great as you think is to work with other people, So, I mean, if you have a really great idea and you've thought about it, always wise to work with other people. And we provide that facility as well to enable you work in an ecosystem, a group of people who are thinking of the same sorts of things that you're thinking about, or who have done the sorts of things that you are thinking about doing. So we also bring you in contact with those kinds of people so they can help you to think it through and all that. Yeah.
Marachi.
Do you have a lot of work as a vice president?
Yes, a fair amount of work. Yes, a fair amount of work. I think quite a bit of work. So the vice president deputizes for the president on very many occasions. That is to say that, for instance, if the president is unable to chair, every week we have the executive council meeting. So if the president, for some reason or the other, is unable to come, the vice president does that, And then I have a monthly meeting. I used to have when I was vice president, of course. I had a monthly meeting with all the governors of the states. That's called the National Economic Council. So that's one of the roles that the Constitution says that the Vice President must have. So every month I have a meeting with all the 36 governors, and they talk about the various things happening in their states, how the federal government can help, what they need to do, and those sorts of things. So quite a bit of work.
Any other question before we call the others?
I have a question.
Yeah, Olivia.
Okay, let's start with Prosper.
Okay, during the time when you are still the Vice President of Nigeria, what are those challenges that you faced during those times? And how do you overcome them?
First, there were many challenges, and some we were able to overcome, many we were not able to overcome. First, there's so many challenges. The first is the challenge of resources, having enough money to do the things that you need to do. So when we came into office, we were producing, the country was producing about over 1 million barrels of oil every single day. But then there were problems in the Niger Delta, right? Some of the militants in the Niger Delta were blowing up, pipelines and all of that, protesting, at the time, marginalization. They felt that the Niger Delta wasn't getting what it ought to get. So they were blowing up pipelines. And at some point, oil production came down to under 700,000 barrels a day. So obviously that meant that we're not making as much money as we ought to make. Now, how did we overcome that? The president and I agreed that I should go out and speak to the militants in the Niger Delta and reach agreements with them about what we need to do and why they needed to stop blowing up the pipelines, And to cut a long story short, we were able to resolve that by simply going to all the communities and speaking to them. And a lot of the young men and women who were involved in some of the militancy agreed to stop and enable, production to go back. So that was one of the issues that we had to encounter while I was Vice President, just so that we don't take the time. That's one.
Olivia?
Yeah.
Are there any things you would like to improve for the Nigeria today?
Oh, definitely. Several things, Olivia. One of the things I'd like to see is, there's a great deal of corruption, that's a great deal of mismanagement of public resources. I'd like to see a definite change in that, People must understand that when you're in public service, the whole point is to use all of the resources to improve the country in various ways, not to steal the money, not to steal the resources, So I'd certainly like to see an improvement in that. I'd also like to see an improvement in the business environment, how we do business. So many things that we can do differently, especially making it easier for people to do business in Nigeria. Making it easier for people to get approvals for things, licenses, passports, easy access to capital if you need to do business. Just as I was saying earlier, the question of how will young people have access to capital to do their businesses, because obviously if you're young, you don't have any money to start a business unless your parents were very wealthy or had enough money to support you with. But the vast majority of Nigerians don't have that. So certainly these are some of the things I'd like to see.
All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll be able to bring in the other junior citizens who have questions as well. Please don't go away. And we're back. You're still watching the Junior Citizens on Branama Television. We have in the house the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. And we've been joined by 3 more junior citizens. We have Ella Anthony, we have Enioluwa Olatunde, and Chidinma Ibe. They have questions and our guest is ready to answer, I'm sure. Let's go.
So my name is Chidinma Ibe, and my question is, did you have any other major role before you became Vice President of Nigeria?
Yes, I did. I'd actually served as Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Lagos some years before. I'd also worked as advisor to a federal Attorney General. And of course, I was a teacher, law teacher at the University of Lagos. And I also worked with the United Nations, did some work with the United Nations in Somalia, where there was a war going on at the time. I was in the justice sector trying to help build court systems and prison systems and all that. And I also practiced law, So those are the sorts of things I was engaged in. Yeah.
I have another question. Like, was there any time where you felt that the people of Nigeria were against you?
No, I never felt that way. I never felt that way. I think that, of course, people criticize governments and criticize people when they're in government. And that's not necessarily to say that they're against you, especially if you understand how government works and how, a country works. So people, look, we're 200 million people. Even if you are doing the very best things, you would find at least a good number, maybe even 1 million people who don't agree with what you're doing. And they will express themselves, they will criticize what you're doing, they'll say, we don't like this, we don't even like you, But that doesn't mean that they're against you. I think it's, one of the things that our Constitution allows people to do is to express themselves, is to criticize, is to say, I don't like this or I don't like that. And anyone who goes into elective office, anyone who goes out there looking for votes saying, I know what to do, I can do this, I can do that, must be ready to hear people say, I don't agree with you, I don't even like what you're doing. Mm-hmm.
My name is Enioluwa Olatunde, and my question is, how is it working with President Buhari?
How was it working with him?
He said, how was it? He means like, how was it like?
Yes, I understand. So it was interesting. It was interesting. So President Buhari, of course, had been president before, but he was military president at the time, was a military head of state, So he came into the office with some experience, from his past and all of that. And, he's a very humorous man, had a sense of humor. I enjoyed his sense of humor. He was someone who I thought, was interesting. I think also, because lots of people never heard him say funny things and all that. So people, I think, even got the impression that maybe he never even laughed. But, so he was a very humorous man. I rather enjoyed working with him. Yes.
I have another question. How did you feel when you knew that you were vice president?
When we won the elections, I was excited. I was very happy because we had worked so hard, campaigned all over the country, went to every nook and cranny. So initially, I was, of course, very happy and excited that we won. And then thereafter, I started feeling, wait a minute, this is huge. We've got to get this right. We've got to do the best we can. It's a huge responsibility. Everyone is hoping that we'll get it right and we'll do the right things. So first, some elation, some excitement, and then thereafter, you get a sense that this is a massive responsibility. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I have some few questions for you. I know that you are a vice president and you are very keen about your Christian values. How do you balance that politics? And I need to learn from you.
Well, first of all, the thing with Christian values, is that the primary thing is that first you must be fair and just, especially if you are a person in government. You must be fair and just, because the first thing to recognize is that there are people of other religions and other faiths. So many. There are those who are Muslims, there are those who are atheists, there are those who don't even believe in God, there are those who believe in traditional religion, as they say. But you have to be fair to all of them, because you are there in order to do justice, as it were, to practically everyone. So I think the very first thing to recognize is that your faith must not get in the way of fairness. You can't say, I'm only going to be nice, and I'm only going to help Christians because you're a Christian, or help Muslims because you're a Muslim, that kind of thing. That's the first thing. Second thing is integrity and honesty and forthrightness. I think that one of the things that the Christian faith, for me in particular, and I believe several other faiths, emphasize integrity, honesty, and all that. And that for me was a very strong guiding principle.
I have another question.
Yes.
I know that there are people who make the law. Is there anyone that encourages Nigerian history, entertainment for children, or educational entertainment for kids? Because most Nigerian children show hardly get proper funding because most of them had not finished.
Have not done one?
Most of them start and don't finish.
Most of them? I didn't hear what you said.
Let me start again.
Okay.
I know that there are people who make the law. Is there anyone that encourages Nigeria's history, entertainment for children, or educational entertainment for kids? Because most Nigerian children show hardly get proper funding because most of them start and don't finish.
Yes, there are. So entertainment and education for children is provided even by law. First, education. By law, every child in Nigeria must go to school. Now, enforcement of the law, how that works is another matter. But by law, a child must go to school, in other words, must go to primary school, and compulsory, mandatorily, you must go to primary school. So there is law that says that you must go to primary school. But then questions around entertainment and all of those kinds of things, they're also provided for by law. In other words, the law supports entertainment, the law supports the entertainment industry. That's why you have television stations, you have places where people, theaters, you have people, schools where people are taught theater and arts and those kinds of things. So every form of entertainment is allowed under our law. Every form is allowed. Now, what you need to know is not so much the law, is how much support is there, how much support is given for those things. In other words, if you wanted to be an entertainer, how much support will you get? A lot depends on where you are. There are some states in Nigeria that support artists, give them some money. But generally speaking, it's usually the private sector, it's usually private people who do that and who support that in various ways. And just as I was saying also, there are very many initiatives to support entertainers. So for example, the Innovation Fund I was talking about supports innovation in entertainment as well, innovation in the arts, especially where there are tech-enabled innovations, So there are various organizations that support arts and support entertainment, and then there are various informal, not necessarily government, that also support the arts and support entertainment.
If I may come in a little, just to help her out. Yeah. I know she's raising the issue of funding by government, like you have in the UK, in the US, Europe, and all these other countries. So she's talking about funding.
Yes.
Is there any law that will state government funding for children's shows that individuals start and they don't finish?
I see. Okay. No. I'm not aware of any law. And I'm not even so sure that in other countries of the world there's necessarily a law that says that you must fund this or that. What tends to happen is that you have trusts. You have, you have an art trust, you know. This is usually something set up by private people, but government supports those things by giving them subventions. So for example, there's an art trust, the Muson is a trust for music, that's Muson here in Lagos. It's formed by private people, founded by private people, and supported by a lot of the big private sector companies and all of that. But that's a fund for purposes of supporting music and training of young people who want to train themselves in music or in the use of instruments and those kinds of things. So generally speaking, what tends to happen is that you have trusts, you have private people who have trusts, and then as part of those trusts, government supports. But I do agree, you know, that, and which is why I said that some state governments support. In fact, at some point, the federal government of Nigeria had a fund for people in theater, for people for Nollywood and all that. It created a very large fund at some point. You know, I'm not certain what has become of it, but at some point there was some support for it. I think it would be helpful if there was a law or you know, something that made it a bit, you know, that made it mandatory for there to be some kind of a fund. Yeah.
Ella, you have another question? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
About the entertainment, there are also examples like Hands-On Initiative and Branama TV.
Initiatives like Branama TV.
Like Hands-On Initiative.
Hands-On Initiative.
Yes, and Branama TV.
Yes.
Like they are also good entertainment for kids.
Right.
So next to the second question.
Was that a question?
No, that was
you just made a
example,
point.
yes.
Okay, right.
So the next question is, if you had an opportunity to be the vice president again, what will you make better?
No, I wouldn't have another opportunity to be vice president. Once you've been vice president twice, 2 terms, you can't be vice president again. So I wouldn't have an opportunity to be vice president again. So, but still, just to your point, you know, if I do have an opportunity to serve in government, you know, the things that I think need to be done are some of the things that I've mentioned. First, I believe very strongly that we need to make it easier for people to do business in Nigeria. We need to make it far easier, you know. So creating a regime of, you know, access to capital, part of what you're saying, for people who want to do business, you know, making it easier for, you know, people to clear their goods in the ports, to export, you know, things like that. I'm very interested in doing those kinds of things. And then dealing with questions of corruption. I certainly think that these are some of the important things I would like to do.
All right, thank you, Ella. Let's ask someone. Dami, do you have another question?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still very active in politics? And do you intend to contest for presidency someday?
I'm not, well, at the moment, I am doing my very best to support all of those who are in government at the federal and state level. I don't think that one should be a distraction in any way. You know, what we ought to do is make the best contributions that we can to those who, and help those who are trying to solve the problems. And that is at state and federal level. And one must continue to do that. Yeah, just as I said, it's our role as citizens to do the best we can. Sometimes that involves saying, I don't think you're getting it right, we think you ought to do this, we think you ought to do that, you know. So that's the sort of role that someone like myself plays, you know, after being in government, being in politics, you know, one has to play that kind of role. Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, just one more question, then I'm sure our guest has questions for you. Olivia.
Has there ever been a time where you felt like being a vice president is too much, that you want to give up and go back to a simple life?
No, there was never such a time. There was never such a time. Part of the reason why it was because I always And I still strongly believe that the best way of serving people is being in government. I have always believed that. And I believe that it's a massive, massive privilege, you know, to serve as vice president of a country of 200 million people. I think it's a massive privilege. And very few people will ever get that opportunity. So getting that opportunity for me was, I thought it was just an incredible opportunity. So at no point in time did it cross my mind to say, well, I'm tired of this and I'd like to walk away. No.
Okay, so let's turn it over, Your Excellency. I'm sure you have questions for the children.
Sure,
Okay.
I do.
Anybody?
So, all right. Well, anyone who wants to answer the question. So how many people here will go into politics and, you know, run for office at some point?
I'm
Olivia.
not really sure because my mom tells me that I know how to make a point in an argument that I should become a lawyer, but I'm not really sure.
I think you should be a lawyer, though. I'm biased because I'm a lawyer, but I think you should be a lawyer. And I think being a lawyer helps in politics. You know, it does help. Yeah. And if you can present a good argument, I think it helps a great deal also. Yeah, I think you should be a lawyer. Why not? You know, and run for office too. You know, yeah.
Politics? Anybody? Them? Politics?
No, not for you either. Amarachi, no. No politics.
Prosper?
Prosper, not even you would run. Why wouldn't you run for Prosper? You sound to me like a politician.
Exactly.
Yes, Ella.
I want to be a lawyer, but
Yeah.
also be an actress.
Also be an actress. Why not? You can be. Why not? You can be a lawyer, you can be an actress. I think these days, a lot of, you know, in the past, when I was growing up, you could only be one thing. You know, be a lawyer, you know, be an accountant, be a doctor. But these days, people can do various things, can do so many things, you know, and so why not? I think it would be a good thing. And for me, you know, being a lawyer is always a good advantage, whatever else you're going to do, you know. So my daughter is a lawyer. She's a trained lawyer, but she's into fashion and fast, you know, moving fashion products and all that. So she runs a store. She's not practicing law, but her legal knowledge is extremely useful for her, you know. So I think that you can be a lawyer and be something else. Why not? Yeah.
I think why my mom told me I should be a lawyer because when I was little, she would be going to I don't know what to call it, but I'll say schools if you want to become a lawyer. But then she decided not to do it because she already had me, her,
Right.
my older sister.
So she decided not to go to school anymore. Oh, wow. Well, you know, she made a big sacrifice for you guys. You know, that's fantastic. It was really, really nice of her.
So do you have more questions for them?
Yes, I do. So what do you think the country needs most today? What do you think the country needs? Yes.
Prosper?
Okay, what the country needs most now is an honest leader.
Yes.
We need a leader that will lead us in truth and faith, and I have to believe that someday the country will be better. I think last month I heard the news, the amount of the money Nigeria is holding the World Bank, and I was perplexed. So assuming we can have a good leader now, and not a bad leader. Though the leader might be good, but the workers of the leader, who knows? The people under the leader might be the staff might be doing some corruption and all that. So it will shorten the fund. So there will not be a lot of money to develop the country. So I think we need a honest and a truthful leader and also a good staff to work under them.
Ella?
Like, it's also the same thing he said, but in a different way.
Don't use the microphone.
Okay. So, we need a good leader too, but a leader that will help us in our society. Like, in case some people like this, they will collect some things, they will steal some things, and the leader will just be there looking. He will not say anything. We need a good leader, a strong leader that can fight for us, that can help us, that can show that he's a leader, not showing that he just came there to just be president. So that's what I could say for them.
I also think that us Nigerians, our voices should be heard from the leaders. Our leaders can also get good ideas from us, but since our voices are not heard, that's why we have some problems in Nigeria today.
Well, how do you think the voices can be heard?
Like, we tried protesting, worked with it, and I think there should just be one person that comes to talk to our leader face to face and convinces him so that we can have the Nigeria that we want tomorrow.
Fantastic.
What about the followers? Responsibility of the followers? The citizens? Yes, Danny?
Okay, so I think we should also respect our leader, not because he's doing anything wrong, we should follow him. And it's not compulsory we talk back or do anything in case they do anything wrong, in case the leader does anything wrong. So we should have the faith and believe that Nigeria can get better. You know what
You know, also, and I like the points that you've all made. You know, the thing with leadership also is that, okay, so leaders obviously need to get a feedback from citizens. They need to hear from citizens, you know. And I think that part of what you could do is, of course, you have blogs, you write your views on blogs, you write your views, you know, post your views on social media and all of that. But I think it's also important that that young people participate in politics, because how a country changes will be through political parties who put forward candidates, and then the candidates win elections. That's how democratic countries run. You know, so even if you have protests and things like that, which are excellent, because the right to protest, the right to freedom of expression is provided in our constitution. But also importantly, you must find a way of expressing yourself continuously, you know, which is why I think, you know, and I've read a few, you know, blogs, very young people who have their own blogs, who talk about liberty, who talk about democracy, who talk about education. Some people just say, I'm interested in education of young women, of girls. And they talk about that on their blogs. They talk about what's going on in different parts of the country. They call the attention of ministers, call the attention of government to it. This is what we want to see done. So I think we can also be constructive. I think we can also do stuff, you know, even if you're not in government, even if you think government isn't listening, I think that you can express yourself in various ways, so that we're not using our Instagram, for those who are on Instagram, we are not just using our Instagram for fashion and all of those kinds of things. We're using it also to express our views and to, you know, express our opinions and suggestions as to how the country can be made better.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions, sir?
No.
None. All right, quick break, a final word from our special guests. We'll be right back. And we're back again to say goodbye to you. But before then, we'll take a final word from our special guest, the former Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Before you say something, Prof, Bello says Why should I be proud to be a Nigerian? I hear my parents every day complaining. So why should I be proud to be a Nigerian? Maybe your final word will talk to Bello.
I think it's important to understand, first of all, that Nigeria has done nobody any wrong. Nigeria hasn't done you wrong. You may not like the leaders. You may not like what the leaders have done. But we all own Nigeria. That's why we need to be proud of it. Nigeria itself has done no one any wrong. Our leaders may not have done as well as we expect. Our leaders may have failed us. So we can criticize our leaders. We can say, I don't like my leader. I don't like what my leader is doing. I'm going to vote him out the next time. We can say all of that. What we mustn't do is to say Nigeria is not a good country. Nigeria is a great country. It's a blessed country. It's a beautiful country. And what we need, obviously, are the right. We need to be able to continue to improve it, you know. And so I think that we should be proud of our country. The fact that your parents, Bello, criticize the country is a good thing. Criticism is part of what makes a country, what makes governments work well, you know. If you criticize the government, I don't like what they're doing, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that, that's fine. But never ever say that your country is not a great country. Your country is a great country. We should be proud of our country. Even if we don't necessarily agree with our leaders, we must be proud of our country. Right.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. It's at this point we say bye-bye to you. This is the end of this episode of The Junior Citizens on Branama TV. On the screen, you see our social media handles. Please follow us, like and subscribe, as they say. Let everybody here join me to say a very big thank you to our special guest.
Thank you too. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
On that note, to everyone, bye.